Hello, this is TyFighterFPV here from TyFighterFPV Build, and I am bringing out my Aurora that I designed recently. And I'm trying to come up with a lightweight race wing, something that'll handle those tight tracks, those corners that you can't seem to nail with any other wing. This one will go out and destroy them for you. So, getting ready to do the build video for it, so jump right on in with us and we'll see what we can come up with. Alright. So when you pull the Aurora out of the box, this is what you're going to get here. You're going to get yourself a set of pre-prepped elevons. They can be light sanded if you prefer, down to your preference. You're going to get your winglets attached with your control rods. You're going to have your accessory bag here. This has got all your other hardware, your motor mount, and your drag reducers. They're basically your spacers in between your center pod and your wings. And so this is everything. Got your laminate, got your spars, and then of course you've got your wing cores here. And focusing more on the wing cores, all of this is pre-prepped. There's not any sanding or anything necessary for it. All of your spars are pre-marked, and we'll show that later in the build video when we actually get to sparring. Alright, so step one on the build, we're going to be working with mainly just the cores for now. So laminate, we don't need right at the moment. Hardware package, we don't need at the moment. Neither do we need any of that. We'll just be working and focusing with the cores for now. And as far as getting the cores ready to actually be glued, it's pretty simple. Everything's just taped. Just remove that and everything will come right out for you. Just do this. And it's alright if some pieces fall off of it, just make sure you keep track of them. Alright, and so you'll notice you have a lot of individual pieces. I'll just sweep these wings out of the way. We've got a lot of individual pieces here, and now I'll explain each one of these. You basically have the front piece here. This is pretty much scrap. You could use it if you want to try and do some sort of GoPro mount. You can mount your FPV camera off to one side, and you can always glue a little bit of this on there if you want to fatten it up to put some sort of GoPro or other HD cam on it. That way it can basically run more flush into the top of your airframe. I've not personally done it, so I'm not sure how that works, but that's there if you want to use it. But repair scraps. You've got your lower wing bed. This here really isn't used either. If you want to, use sections of it to add whatever shapes wherever it's there, you could use it. But mainly what we're focusing on is these pieces here, and you'll notice I have the motor mount pre-marked. This you basically want to round out to the outer edge of your markings here, and that's going to be the correct diameter for your plywood motor mount, which is included in your accessory kit, and we will get to later. And then this here is just the battery plug. If you're using anything smaller than a 2200 milliamp 3-cell lithium battery, this battery bay is specifically cut out just for that. But if you're using anything smaller than that, this is for basically taking up that space. So you could either glue it in, or you can assemble the plane with that full-size battery bay and cut these after the fact, and they can just be removable so you can run whatever you want whenever you want. And then this here is, again, just leftovers from the cut, but if you're using, because 22 milliamp 3-cell lipos, they will come in different thicknesses. This is cut to take the deepest thickness right now. So if you've got a thinner battery, and you need to raise it up just a little bit, you can glue this right in the bottom of that battery bay, and that will raise that battery up to where it is flush with the top of the plane. And that is basically your goal with the center section, is your battery ends up being your battery hatch as well. Alright, so now we've got our wing cores here, and this is pretty straightforward, just digging these out of here. And the only thing you'll notice is on the back of the cores you got some of these stringleys that's left over from the cut. There shouldn't be any on the wings that are attached, but there might be some weak ones. Just brush them off real quick and simple. And so that's your wing core. And you'll notice on the wingtips, we've got the lines here pre-marked for your spars, and later on you'll see exactly how to cut those in, but you're basically going to just be cutting that in with a razor blade, doing a score down the wing, and the spars are flat bar, so there's no widening of the spar gaps or anything like that. You just feed your glue in, put your spar in, and it basically grabs onto it itself. So that is one wing panel, and this is number 2 wing panel. Again, just make sure you don't have any of those stringlies. You don't want those under your paint. And so they are your 2 wing cores. So let's say, hypothetically, you're excited about building this kit, you get a little bit too ahead of yourself, and let's say you end up boogering up your motor mount. So these spars need to line up just right so that they fit into these slots just fine, which I mentioned before, you do need to sand these out and make sure that they fit snugly against those spars. You want them to slide in and slide out with little friction, but you do want just a little bit there so you know that this motor mount is not going to be jiggling around on you. And all that's pre-marked is the shape of it. That's just reference for when you're actually rounding out for your motor mount, so you can get that good and round and to the correct tolerances there. But let's say that pre-cut motor mount got a little bit ahead of yourself and the spars didn't come out right and they're not lining up. So I actually planned on that possibly happening because I know that some people may or may not have a little bit of trouble with that. So I actually include more than enough. This is the round bar spar here that comes with the kit. There's more than enough to do probably 3 motor mounts with this, as well as I have a whole extra flat bar with it too. So if you do make that mistake, basically I'll show you right now how you can cut yourself out a new motor mount. This one I've already redone the round section, that's already there, but you basically just want to line up your top and bottom wing beds, and you want to make sure it's firmly pressed against the table. You don't need a ton of pressure, just make sure everything is properly lined up and square with each other, and hold just enough pressure so it doesn't shift on you. And if you see that it's slightly off, just shift it as needed. You want this to be pretty well aligned. And what I generally do is you find the bottom section of your wing, which is easy if you take your battery plug out. This is the bottom section down here. And you want to line up the bottom of your motor mount with the bottom of your wing bed. And then you just kind of hold that there in place. And you grab your marker or pen. I use a Sharpie fine point, and then you just strike your line right around the outside. And depending on what motor you're using, you may or may not need to hollow anything out in the center to make room for your motor shaft. If you're using the spec motor, you don't need to do anything in the center, but if you are using the Cobra 2217 motor, it doesn't matter the KV, the shaft of that motor does stick out past the back of the motor mount. So you will need to hollow out that center section of the mount just a little bit to make room for that. Last thing you want to do is get your motor in there and then melt that EPP foam into your bearings, because that is not fun. And so once you get that, then it's just the process of sanding that back down again and getting that round shape. So we're getting ready to glue the main frame of the plane together, and the only thing that we need to watch out for here is the spars. Yes, they are pre-marked. You just want to make sure you can see your reference marks on the top and bottom portion of the kit. So if one of your lines is a little bit weak and you're worried about not being able to see it once the kit is completely glued together, you want to just use a regular ink pen. I find that this does not bleed through your spray paint as bad as Sharpie will. Even the fine point Sharpie will bleed through quite badly. I had a couple planes that I had some pretty bad Sharpie marks on. Alright, so you just want to come in and you just want to highlight where those spars are going to go. And again, the pen is going to show up a lot lighter than the Sharpie. And we're just highlighting those points. And we'll do that top and bottom. And we will be all set to glue together. And you only really need to worry about doing this on the center core. You can try and transfer your lines over to the wing panels, but it's really not necessary. So now that's done, we are ready to glue together. Of course, the wingtips, nothing's getting glued on them yet, so you can always transfer your spar marks on the top whenever you please. So let's go ahead and glue up this frame. And what I like to do is I like to apply my glue to the center core first, just so I don't have a whole bunch of glue on the back side of the plane unnecessarily. Saves a little bit of glue for you as well. And so you just want to get a nice thin bead all the way around the perimeter of the plane and stop. I know about where to stop on this one, but what you can do is put another mark on the trailing edge there where your wing core actually stops. There's no need to glue all the way out here if you don't need to. And then I take my finger, and I'm using foam tack here, and I just want to smear that into the foam real good and thin. And some people will take the foam tack and they'll glue it on and then they tack it. And I used to do that, but the only thing I noticed is I would get a whole bunch of little stringlies and they'd kind of bunch up and create almost like lint balls on the top of it, but they were real tacky, and sometimes they would kind of mess with your paint. So I generally work with one piece at a time just because you'd get dirt, dust, and debris on the other side. So now we're going to come on this wing panel here and do a quick test fit. Just get an idea of where you need to glue on the bottom. And we're going to go ahead and apply our glue, again very thin, over the whole surface. And you can glue over where your battery bay is. I personally don't like to put glue there just because if I hot wire out for my wires, it cuts a little bit cleaner if there's no foam tack there. It sinks into the foam a little easier. So now that you got those two thin layers, you don't really need to let it set up that much. By the time you rub it in with your finger, it's pretty much going to be tacky. And you really don't need a whole lot of glue here. And you want to line up the leading edge of your plane first and work that in. And your battery bay is thin enough on this that it's probably not going to want to line up for you perfectly, so you want to kind of work that into place. And that's another benefit of not letting that glue set up more, is you got a little more time to work with it. So you can basically kind of work this in, and they should line up pretty seamlessly. And once you get it set where you want it, and you want to, if you do have a slight gap on it, that's fine, but you generally want it on the upper side of the plane. So try and line up the bottom as flush as you can. And when you got it set where you want it, you just give it a firm push. I generally like to set it on the table. Just push and hold for a couple seconds, and that'll set up pretty well. And you can see it's holding pretty solid. And then you basically just do the same thing with the other side. And don't worry too much about getting this glue on your fingers. It actually comes off pretty easily. If you take your finger and you rub it around in the palm of your hand, that foam will pretty much roll right off your skin. And you've got to drop your glue bottle on its side sometimes. If you're gonna make mistakes, it's best to just be clumsy and drop your glue bottle on the floor and, you know, that sort of thing. And once again, I generally start with my leading edge, and you kind of work that into place. And just light pressure when you're lining it up, and it'll tack. You can see it's holding, and it'll tack there, but it'll allow you to, if it's off like that, you can simply pull back a little bit, reposition it to where it needs to be, and again you just hold light pressure on it and it'll hold it sturdy enough for you to line it up, but not completely lock it in place yet. So once you get it lined up where you want it to be, the big thing too is watch your battery bay, because it'll want to bow in on you, so it'll basically want to do that. I don't know if you could really see that. So you basically want to make sure that's just flush with the bottom of the plane. Once it's lined up, press it together solid. And there it is, all glued up. And at this point, you could either let it set up a little bit longer before you spar it. If you spar it, you do have to be careful. It can shift on you. It's likely it probably will not. But for those of you that have not built very many of these, or have not built at all, probably a good idea. Let this set up for probably a good hour, hour and a half. Then the glue should be hard enough that you can come back in and go ahead and do your spars.